We're back with another edition of the Ad Podcast. We have Aja Bradley-Kemp, who's a seasoned marketer and experiential event designer and founder of Conversate Collective, a brand experience agency that helps lifestyle, tech, consumer brands build meaningful relationships through shared experiences. She has over 20 years of experience growing brands like Expedia, MAC Cosmetics, Sunglass Hut, and Reebok, to name a few. She's known for creating campaigns and events that connect audiences with culture and community, a natural connector and storyteller. She also founded Love for My Curious Festival, the first multicultural beauty event celebrating curly and textured hair in Australia and New Zealand. And her work blends strategic marketing, event design, and cultural engagement to help brands spark connectivity and loyalty. Aja, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate you making the time. Uh-oh, did we lock up? Can you hear
Thanks
me?
for having me, Dylan. And just so you know, it's Asia.
Oh, excuse me. Thanks for the correction there. I should have asked you before we hit the button. So, I know I gave kind of a long bio there, but do you want to maybe give us a little bit of context? Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? And how'd you get into the industry?
Yeah, so I'm a proud New Yorker, New York native. I live in Atlanta now, but I started out working in the marketing industry on the PR side. So I spent many years working at agencies and then for consumer brands. For example, you mentioned MAC Cosmetics. I spent a lot of years with that company, both in New York, out of the headquarters in New York, but also in Australia. But throughout all of the roles that I had in the early years on the PR side, one of my favorite parts of the role was when we leveraged events as a way to launch a product or tell a story or generate buzz for our client or for the product that we're launching. And so that is where my love of experiential started. And I remember at one time I was working at an agency and I was talking to a colleague. He specialized in talent for some of the events that we were doing for our clients. And he and I were working together on a Virgin Mobile, Richard Branson activation. And I was like, we should start a event practice at this agency and just produce events, because that's how much I loved events. And this was in the early 2000s, and he was like, no, you're crazy. And so it didn't happen. So when I moved back to the US in 2015, I had the opportunity. I was doing some contract work, helping some other agencies with their clients and working on the comms side of things. And then, opportunities for events fell in my lap again. And that was just where that spark reignited. And I decided, I wanted to focus my business full time on events. And so that's where the current iteration of Conversate Collective was born. And we've been rocking and experiential ever since.
I love that. Well, experiential has a love-hate place in my heart. I absolutely love event marketing. I love going to conferences. I'm usually on the road every other week with the show, filming at events, but I absolutely hate putting events on because it's the most stressful thing in the entire world. There's so many moving pieces. And it's all this build up to this one moment. And then the thing that I'm always scared of is are people actually going to show up? Right. So it's a really unique skill set that only, the non-faint hearted are battle seasoned and ready for. I feel like in this moment, experiential marketing is becoming more important than ever. When you have a world of AI where the biggest question that people have today are, can I trust my own eyes? Are things real? The one thing that's hard to you can't AI a real event, although AI is being leveraged in experiential and unique ways. But when brands show up in the real world, it's such a strong touch point. Do you feel like that was precedent for you in your skill set and what you're doing now, the juxtaposition of real life versus digital and digital detox and AI and all the things that are kind of confronting the industry in real time?
Yeah, well, that is the one thing I am secure about when it comes to AI. There's a lot of unknowns and a lot of big questions and a lot of scary prospects. But the one thing I know for sure is that events will have a place in the future, regardless of what happens with AI, because you can't, you can have an event with a bunch of robots walking around, but people at the end of the day want to connect with other people. And so, when you can question, AI is so good now that, when you're watching Instagram or something on YouTube or whatever it is, you always have to question, what am I seeing? Is this real? I have to fact check it. The great thing is when you're at an event, you won't have to, at least as far as we know right now, you won't have to fact check if the person that you're speaking to or the environment that you're in is real, unless they implant chips in our brains. But for the time being, my outlook is very positive on events and experiences, and I'm looking forward to what's to come. And the great thing about technology too is there'll be fun ways to integrate that into experiences. So I think everything goes hand in hand. I don't think it's a either or; it's more of an and.
Yeah, I love that. One way that we're seeing AI or personalization show up in the experiential space is kind of the personalization of experiences. So I was at Cannes this year, and at the Amazon booth, you had this opportunity to fill out a survey, and then it would spit out like a unique fragrance made just for you. And then there was another Netflix activation where, again, you kind of answered information. You gave the AI information, and then you went into a room, and then it showed you a movie that was kind of custom built just for you. Do you feel like kind of big data and AI has the opportunity, or their ability to deliver personalized experiences in the experiential world? And is that something you're thinking about?
Yeah, for sure. Personalization is one of my favorite tactics or elements to use in an event. So whether it's a technology driven personalization experience, or it's just having something, an activation, an analog activation that's there, or an analog moment where someone is personalizing an item for you based on your name or color or preference. Personalization will always win. And so having AI now and different technologies only just enhance the experience. So always looking for fun ways to just kind of up the ante on the personalization moments.
Yeah, I love that. I attended another activation at Expo West last year where Bush's Baked Beans was making personalized aprons if you're willing to like stand in the booth, right? So you could get your name stitched on this apron that said "I love beans." And I stood in line, even though I had a press pass, and waited the 45 minutes or whatever, because I wanted to get my wife like her name "I love baked beans" apron, because for one, I thought it would be kind of funny, but two, I wanted to, I travel a lot, so I wanted her to think that I was thinking of her, which I was, of course. But yeah, I love that, the power of like those personalized moments. So much of the the premium experience of like giving out stuff at experiences can sometimes feel like we're just like filling up landfills with junk. But when a brand has really gone above and beyond and thought of something that's both unique and exciting and kind of fun, but also has that personalization element, people are willing to wait for sometimes quite a while to go through that experience.
Yes, yeah, we always see people waiting. We do a lot of events for clients in the beauty industry, and people often say, why would somebody come to an event to get their makeup done or to get their hair done? Aren't they already done? It's the personalized moment. It's the fact that someone is catering to you for a time. And one of our clients during the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, we had these beautiful resin combs that women could choose, and then they could have their name engraved on them. We did silk pillowcases where they could have their name engraved on it. And yes, people stand in line and they wait, and they come back after the event is over to pick them up. They don't leave home. They don't leave the event without their personalized item. So it has to be intentional, and it has to make sense for the brand and for what it is that you're trying to communicate about your business.
I love that. You mentioned kind of your event experience coming out of the PR discipline, And it seems like more than ever, events are becoming not only a place to show up and experience the brand in the real world, but they're also kind of a mass communications opportunity. I just came back from CES and we were official press there, and there were multiple touch points throughout the event that were, opportunities to break news if you went and had a conversation or showed up for a press briefing. So they're kind of using events as a moment in which to launch their larger comm strategy. How much are you thinking about, events as kind of the launch point for a larger PR effort?
I definitely think that's a great strategy because there you have a built-in audience already, depending on where you're launching it at. So I think events are a great place to make an announcement because you have, like I said, a captive audience, people in the room, people in the area, they're reporting on the event already. And so being able to, add some information about what you're doing is a great way. You just have to do it in a way that you don't get lost in the mix as well. So it depends on, I think that strategy works also depending on the brand and what it is that you're launching. If, you're a smaller brand, smaller mid-sized brand, that might be a good time. But sometimes even if you're a larger brand, it's a great time as well. I mean, I remember last year, at CES in general, but before I just skip to my example from last year, but CES in general is always a breeding ground, so to speak, for breaking news. That's why the attendees are there. That's why the press goes, because they want to find out what's new. So it definitely makes sense at a place like CES. But again, it just kind of depends on who you are, what you're announcing, so that you don't get lost. And from a economies of scale standpoint, if you're a smaller brand, it might make sense for you to break some news at CES, but you got to make sure that it's hot, that it's something that people are going to want to know about, that you're communicating it in a way that is going to cut through the noise. And the example I was going to give last year was, Delta, they launched their 100 years at CES. They did it in a way, and it got a lot of attention. And so I think that was the perfect venue for them to do that. But there's always, great activations. Like this year, I loved what Lego and Star Wars did. Not that it was, I don't know how much of it was a press announcement, but just seeing their activation with, being able to play a video game on the Sphere again, that was very cool. And it's not just how you're attracting traditional media, it's how you can get that earned media from content creators, just the general public that are going to like and share and amplify what you're doing.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you just kind of hit on that idea of also using your event strategy, whether it's a proprietary event or whether you're activating at a larger cultural moment like CES. Really using that as a moment to invite content creators along with you to help tell your story. My last agency, working on the Adobe business, we actually, didn't just invite influencers to come by our booth, but we actually brought them with us to some of our touch poll events. Adobe Max, we brought 300 of influencers in partnership with another agency. But even for things like NAB or IBC, we would bring maybe 10 or 20 with us. And instead of us telling our story, we let them tell our story. And these creators are way better at, creating content and getting it out fast. So then your content is hitting the press while everybody's sitting at home, like looking for what's happening at the event that wasn't able to go. So you're getting kind of that third-party endorsement and you're getting that speed. How much are you thinking about events as an opportunity to not just invite content creators from an earned perspective, but actually paying content creators, doing your influencer marketing at an event versus doing it like in your studio or wherever they normally are creating their content?
Yeah, well, we've had the opportunity with several clients, especially in the beauty space, to be able to invite creators to attend different events that we're doing so that they can amplify it, as well as, like you said, there's some arrangements that we've made with paid influencers for them to specifically, talk about the event. We've, had influencers be correspondents on the brand's behalf, and attend, either an event that the brand was doing or an event that the brand had some kind of connection to. So those are always really great opportunities to let your message, your personality about the brand kind of come out naturally and through the lens of that creator. And it's always great, brands, I don't see it as much now, but I know kind of in the early days of, of creator partnerships, a lot of brands would have very specific do's and don'ts or scripts that they would give creators. And I think brands have wisened up that, yes, you give some guardrails, you give some general information about your brand, what are the key message that you'd like to get across. But then after that, you really got to let the creators run with it and do their thing, because they are going to talk about your brand in a way that makes sense for their audience, and that's authentic to them. So I think that's always important when you're working with a creator to, let them do what they do. That's why you hired them, because you're attracted to the way that they connect with their audience. So let them, do that work to connect with their audience on your behalf.
Yeah, so smart. I feel like brands are loosening up the strings to give creators a lot of trust now, and understanding that they know their audience the best. And of course, you have certain marketing messages you want to get across, but you by no means want to end up in a situation where you're asking them to create a commercial, because that's not going to land and it's not going to do you any justice, or it's not going to make the creator very happy with you either, right? Love that. How much are you thinking about content as not only a way to get more leverage or more ROI out of an event, but really as a way to draw people in? One of the things that I'm noticing at a lot of events is some brands that are smart will build a studio inside their activation or somewhere maybe adjacent to their activation. And they will be inviting influencers and journalists and other partners and leaders kind of into that content studio. It creates kind of a spectacle, because whenever people see cameras and lights, like they kind of get drawn in almost to a moth to a flame. But then again, that idea of like own content, you're creating and pumping out content, hopefully as fast as real time as possible. Are you thinking about kind of those newsroom or production components and using that as both a way to draw people in, but also create a content engine while you're activating?
Yes, for sure. As a matter of fact, right before this, I was on a 2-hour call with my team. We're getting ready for Super Bowl. And for one of the clients that we're working with, we are creating a specific space with content creators in mind for them to come in and create content from the event.
Let's go. Are you able to talk much about that Super Bowl activation, or is it under hush hush for now?
It's under hush hush for now, but I will say, let me see. What can I say? We're creating a space for content creators. I can say that, but you know what? It is a charity event, so I'm sure the organization wouldn't mind me sharing. So the NFL, the off the field NFL players, Off the Field NFL Wives Association.
Nice.
That's the name of the organization. They do an event every year in the Super Bowl host city. It's this year it's going to be on Friday, February the 6th. If you go to their Instagram page or their website, you'll see where you can purchase tickets. It is a fundraiser where the money goes back to local organizations in the host city. And it's an amazing organization that is made up of the wives of current and former NFL players. And they spend the entire year doing programming and events and activities in communities around the country.
So cool.
So it's a wonderful event to support. It's a wonderful organization to support. So actually, your audience, if you guys go and get tickets, then you'll be able to experience the content creation space that we're creating at the event.
That's amazing. Well, I'll be at Super Bowl, so I will definitely check it out, and we'll link in the show notes so people can purchase tickets and maybe come check out the activation and see part of the programming. So awesome. So, another thing that I was thinking about in this, kind of world in which things like digital detox and people, I know 17-year-olds that aren't on social media anymore, there's definitely kind of a backlash amongst the Generation Alpha and young Generation Zs and wanting to like be more, present and less connected. But I was also thinking about like brand love and, the value of an experiential impression versus a digital impression. Are you familiar with the program where BMW allows you to pick up your car at the factory in Europe and then drive it all around Europe and then ship it back to America? Have you heard of that program?
No, I haven't. That's amazing.
Yeah, well, I just think about those moments where brands allow consumers to kind of, get a little bit closer to where the product is made, whether that's farm to table dining or, going to Amsterdam and going on a tour of the Heineken factory or, going to Scotland and going on a tour of the Macallan whiskey factory. How much is kind of this idea of brands inviting their consumers into the supply chain, the manufacturing process, the history of the brand? How much do you think that is kind of an experiential innovation, and how important is that to brands to invite their consumers into those physical environments outside of activations?
Yeah, I think that is a major experience that a brand can create, or interaction that a brand can create with its core consumer, and also a way to help them connect with new consumers. I'm trying to think of the brand. It is a spirits brand, and I don't know if it's Guinness or Johnny Walker, but somewhere in Europe. I can send it to you after this if you want to
Please.
put it in the notes. One of those brands, they have a whole building, an experience that they offer to the general public, that, kind of takes them through the journey of how the spirit is made. And then the end of it is a bar experience. So I think things like that, and it's a ticketed, activity, you go, and things like that really bring a brand story to life. I was thinking about too, I was in Paris last year, and Louis Vuitton, they have a museum and a restaurant kind of all in the one location. And I think I read recently that they're kind of expanding that experiential retail throughout the world into other markets. So, all of those opportunities are great ways to tell your story and really bring it to life. And it's very similar to, what we used to do in PR back in the day. In the beauty industry, we, would take journalists when we were getting ready to launch a product. We would take journalists to the factory of where that collection was made to hear from the experts that formulated it and talk about all of the reasons why. A couple of years ago for Cantu, which is a hair care brand that we work with, we took 20 people to Hawaii to launch one of their collections that was the core ingredients were guava and ginger. And we did 7 events in 4 days that really brought the theme of that collection to life, which was Feel the Relief. But it also educated and told the story about why these ingredients were so beneficial for the hair. And, we were able to generate, I want to say, over 4 million impressions, social media impressions from that. But, so those types of things, like I said, where you can really have an extended period of time to tell your brand story, or even, better if you can afford it to do that.
Yeah.
Because those all things are not, those aren't cheap to do.
Sadly, Beverly Hills was in the running for the new Louis Vuitton hotel, but the residences unfortunately voted down the permitting. So we almost got one of those Louis Vuitton experiences here in the States, but I guess residents can be fickle sometimes about progress versus keeping the status quo. But we won't hate on Beverly Hills too much for that. So
I heard that I was watching the what is the show on Netflix? It's one of the real estate
Selling
shows with
Sunset
Ryan
or something like
Serhant,
that?
and well, his is
Okay.
something else, something New York. But in one of the last couple of episodes, they were launching a Mercedes-Benz residences in Miami, which looked pretty cool.
Yeah.
The brands want to be a part of your life at
Totally.
every part of
And
your life.
you talked a little bit about the work that you did with Virgin, and if you think about Virgin, like what an ultimate experience brand, right? Like they have cruise ships and airlines and hotels, but then they also have these other business units that kind of merge from that obsessive that obsessive attention to detail and wanting to provide a great experience, and then the brand has all sorts of other tentacles that flow out from that. So I think there are definitely, and what about the Tommy Bahama restaurants? It's like you want to go and have some coconut shrimp and listen to a steel drum and feel like you're in the Florida Keys. You can do that anytime you want to at a Tommy Bahama restaurant. So I love that. All right. Conversate Collective focuses on connection. One of the things that the experiential industry gets a bad rep for is measurement. So what are some ways that you are able to quantify ROI or measurements with your clients that can get into some of those harder metrics that digital provides so well with, click-throughs and impressions and return on investment?
Yeah, so I think that it's a little bit of a broad question. The important thing is that starting with the end in mind when you are working either with your client or as a brand, when you're deciding to do an event or create some kind of experience, it's at that point early in the piece, understanding or making a decision on what are the things that we do need to measure, or why are we doing this? Is it because you need to sell XYZ product at Walmart and see a lift there? Is it more about getting samples in people's hands? Is it an awareness play? So it's understanding upfront what the goal is. And then I think brands have to be a little more strategic about how they leverage their internal teams to measure the results or the outcomes from an event or whatever the campaign is. So sometimes, you can't solely rely on experiential to get a sales outcome, especially if you're not putting the pieces in place for you to be able to measure and track sales from that event, whether it's a coupon or any other mechanism. So I think it's just really important. There's a way to see a return, but you just have to be smart about what is the return that you're trying to get. I think emotion is a key metric for brands to use as well, because these experiences, these experiences are about how are we connecting with our customer. And so measuring what the return on emotion is. Are you trying to build your database? We had one client where their key driver for doing these events was building their text subscriber database, because they ultimately would see a lot of activity and return once they got people into their marketing funnel via text messaging. So there's a lot of ways to do it. It's about sitting down and being strategic and having the conversations up front about how we're going to measure, versus sometimes it becomes an afterthought. And then, someone's CFO or a leader, someone senior leadership is like, why are we spending all this money? What can you prove? And then it's like you have to try to backtrack and re-engineer something. And it's just better to have those conversations up front.
Yeah, I think that's really smart, because honestly, the best experiences are when you don't get sold to, but then on your own volition later on, you've had a great experience with the brand, you remember them. And then when you're in a store or you're online and you remember that experience, then you go buy it. So I think it's also important to understand where in the marketing funnel experiential sits. But I love that idea of, that doesn't mean you can't reverse engineer a step in the funnel through an experience, whether that's collecting cell phone numbers by putting up signs of a number to text, or asking people to follow you on social media as kind of a value exchange for entry or some elevated experience. So you can still gamify those, mid-funnel metrics through, as long as you do proper experience planning up front. So I love that insight as well. So thank you for that. So I want to talk a little bit about you starting your own experience. So Love My Curls Festival. Can you talk a little bit about why that was something in the market that you saw that was an unmet opportunity and some white space? And why did you decide to kind of step out and start your own experience versus building something for a brand?
So we do both here, but to your point and observation, it was an unmet need. So I spent almost 10 years living in the Australian market. And when I moved back to the States, I noticed the natural hair, textured hair movement was really booming at the time. And what I noticed was that the community that we had here as Black American women around our hair care events, influencers, education, all of that we did not have when I lived in Australia. And there's Australia is a very multicultural country. So you have a lot of Africans, Asians, Middle Eastern women, of course, European, Black Americans. And so, there was a time when I was living in Australia and I spent almost a whole day trying to find a hairstylist to do my hair, because they did not have the education on working with textured hair. So when I moved back here and I just saw the abundance of resources, I was like, that is something that, my friends need in Australia, is, this community, this information. And so, when I designed it for, my 10 friends that I knew would need it, and it just kind of grew. And we did an event, and we had over 300 women that came out rather, and they came from around the country. So we did it in Sydney, and we had women from around the country that attended. And the one thing that was very impactful and really underscored my personal values, one thing that came through was that the women that participated in the event, came to the event, were of a variety of racial backgrounds. And so even though I knew Australia was a multicultural country, when I designed the event, I really had designed it in mind for me and my 10 Black girlfriends that lived there, that I knew, which had struggled with, finding places to get their hair done. That was kind of like my primary consumer. But as we started planning it and building it and talking to different people, we just realized how, and then even once, the event happened, we just realized how so many of the experiences that we have as women when it comes to our hair, they're not solely unique to just Black women. Now, that's not to say that Black women, especially here in the US, don't face, issues of discrimination and have had negative experiences in the workplace because of their hair. I'm not minimizing that, but the thing that I learned in the process is, the standards of beauty, when you have curly hair, whether you're Black, white, yellow, green, whatever, the standards of beauty are the same. It's the straight hair is beautiful. And I know I'm wearing my hair straight today, but that's what the standard is. And so many women, as young women, they are told that their curly hair is unruly and difficult, and there's a lot of negative talk. And again, we saw that regardless of the racial background. So what I loved about Love My Curls is that it was a moment where women came together to celebrate their hair and love their hair, and we loved on each other. And so, that's the story behind it, and that's the reason why I did it, and it was successful. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit, so we did the event in 2019. We were all set to do the event again in 2020, and I was actually getting ready to get on a plane to go back to Sydney to plan the event in early 2020. So it was February, March, and and COVID happened. And I decided not to get on the plane and go because I was going to be staying with my in-laws who were elderly, and we didn't know at the time what it all meant, and so I decided not to go. But had I gotten on that plane, I would have been on one of the first, if not the first flight where they started quarantining people in Australia. So their response, was very different than here in the US. So they put people into hotels like as soon as they landed, and they were stuck there for weeks. So and so then with everything that happened with COVID, I didn't do another Love My Curls festival. But for those in your audience who are, passionate about beauty and the curly hair community, there is a wonderful event that happens here in the US called CurlyCon. And it's, has a similar premise in terms of it's a very multicultural event, and it's all about celebrating women with
I love that
hair.
Well, I used to represent the world's largest female fitness influencer, Demi Bagby, and she is half Iranian. And, she had very curly hair, and we would get, endorsement offers all the time from, hair companies that hadn't quite done the research or hadn't really figured out like, she needs products that have, different needs. And eventually we did get some outreach from some companies that were specializing in hair of that texture, and we're able to do some deals with them, and more than anything, just find some great products for her to use day to day. So love that you brought awareness to, the fact that beauty comes in all different sizes, shapes, colors, hair textures, and brands would be good to, continue to keep that in mind as they build out their products and different activations. So I wanted to ask you, what is the biggest mistake that you see brands do when they're trying to enter and do an experience, or when they're trying to enter into a community that they maybe hadn't quite fully vetted or thought through?
That's a good question. I think it's like with anything, it's if you come at it with, this is what we want people to know about us, or if it's about me versus them, I think that's, that's the biggest concern. So if you are trying to enter a new market, a new community, a new audience, I think the most important thing is to listen and to show up where they already are and provide value to them in their environments and in a way that is going to be important to them. So it's about serving those people versus trying to push a message in their face.
I love that. What skills do you think marketers need to beef up on now that are more important than ever in kind of the age of AI as it pertains to the experiential marketing side of the business?
I think we all have to learn how to leverage AI in a way that, makes our work more productive and efficient. And, from, different group chats and things that I'm in, I think a lot of us are doing it. I haven't met too many people that are in our industry that are scared of AI or say they don't want to do that. So I think as an industry, we're always looking for the new thing anyway by nature of what we do. And we will always want to be on top of what's next. So, I think it's going to be about finding ways to use AI that makes sense for our industry and help us do our jobs faster and maybe take the stress out of them. And so, that's what I see with AI. I haven't personally experienced a lot of roadblocks with using it. And it's something that, we're using like every day in our agency.
Love it. Well, this was a fascinating conversation. Really appreciate you coming on and giving us a little bit of advice and sharing some of your personal journey and some of your tips. If there are folks who are listening today, where would you like to point the audience to either connect with you or learn more about your agency?
Yeah, you can definitely find me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. And if you want to learn more about how to create your own amazing experiences, whether it's for clients, for yourself, or for your brand, definitely check out my podcast called Making the Moment.
Fellow podcaster.
It's on. Yes. So you'll have to come on and chat with us. But we've had, so you can find us on YouTube and Spotify, all the podcasting channels, and on Instagram, it's at Making the Moment Pod on Instagram and TikTok. And there we talk to everyone from the head of events at Visa to the founder of the event that I mentioned earlier, CurlyCon, to the owner of the Slime Museum, all talking about experiences and how businesses can better connect with their customers.
I love that. We'll link to your show in the show notes as well. And for those of you who are watching for the first time, don't forget to give us a follow or a subscribe. If you're listening to the show and you give us an honest rating, that's how we find a larger audience organically. And last but not least, if there's a marketer out there somewhere, somebody in experiential land, maybe somebody at a PR role within their company, or just somebody who you think would be interested in the conversation that we shared today, don't forget to share the show. And with that, I will wish you a good night, and maybe we will get an opportunity to meet together at the Super Bowl this year.
Yes, for sure.
I will do so. Give me a shout. Have a great night.